Does fruit make you fat, or could an apple a day actually keep the body fat at bay? There's been a lot of controversy around fruit and fructose consumption in recent years, but there's some really cool studies actually indicating that consuming fruits like apples may actually be protective in terms of our body composition or weight loss. So we're going to dive in and talk about a few pieces of research and emerging evidence that supports the idea of maybe including things like apples or foods that are rich in polyphenols in our daily diets and the potential benefits from fruit. So instead of fear-mongering about these single ingredient whole foods, this episode is going to dive into a little bit more of the science and what we see when people actually regularly include fruits like apples on a regular basis. So there's actually enough studies with this association out there to have what's called a review study. So even though a lot of these are observational in nature, we can't actually have a review of many of these observational studies. So we'll kind of dive into that, as well as the strength of the evidence around some of these claims around fruit consumption and the actual numbers. What are we looking at in terms of weight loss or weight gain and any sort of protective health effects? So first and foremost, there was a study published by a highly respected journal, which is the PLOS One Medicine. So that is a journal if you're interested in checking that out. They followed around 130,000 people from 1986 to 2010, so around 24 years total. And every 4 years, they examined changes in dietary patterns, including whether or not people had added or removed fruits and vegetables. So every time people added fruits or vegetables to their diet, they experienced a weight loss over the 4-year period. But this association was particularly strong when people were adding apples as one of those ingredients to their daily diet. For example, when apples were added, we saw an average 1.24 pounds of weight loss, and berries were a close second at 1.11 pounds of weight loss. Now, this is an associational study, so we can't necessarily draw causation here of saying, well, the apples caused the weight loss. It may be more indicative of a general trend or pattern in terms of health behaviors, right? Sometimes people include more fruits or single ingredient whole foods when they're deliberately making an effort to get healthier. And you might be thinking too, well, losing just over a pound over a longer time horizon may not be super impressive, but it's not like these people were working with health and fitness coaches or maybe super educated when it comes to their health and fitness or weight loss. So the fact that we're seeing the inclusion of these foods lead to a positive outcome, I view that as actually a positive indication or a sign that maybe we should be doing more of this in the future. These were not individuals who were in a randomized controlled trial, assigned a coach or a meal plan, or doing these different things to rapidly lose body fat. It was more of observing the association of including things like fruits and berries in the diet, and what was the net result in terms of people's weight loss. They weren't instructed to eat in a calorie deficit or even anything like that. So the fact that they actually lost weight without being instructed to eat in a deficit is a sign, I would think, it's a positive sign in the right direction when it comes to fruit consumption. This goes to show that even making the smallest and simplest changes when it comes to our health can be of benefit and shouldn't be overlooked. Now, let's dive into the review study, a little bit more substantial level of evidence here and layers in terms of how we can view apples and the polyphenols in apples and potential results when it comes to our body composition. In one particular trial, people were instructed to eat 300 grams of apples per day over the course of 12 weeks. So they're actually receiving direct instructions versus just making sort of these observations of what people added or removed from their daily diets. And that was all the instruction that they received, was just add 300 grams of apples and do that for 12 weeks. Now, over the 12 weeks, the participants lost an average of 2.6 pounds. So over 12 weeks, that's actually a pretty meaningful amount of weight, especially when, again, these aren't individuals who are having controlled amounts of exercise or being in a calorie deficit or having this highly regimented study, specifically just receiving the instruction to consume 300 grams of apples. Another very interesting study didn't look at apple consumption per se, but the researchers gave participants a drink with apple polyphenols contained in the beverage. And this way, researchers could give a placebo, or basically like sugar water, to another group, and then they could have the polyphenol group. And when they compared this, they actually noticed that there were improved results with the group of participants who were consuming the apple polyphenols. Over the course of 12 weeks, the group that was drinking the polyphenols had significantly lower subcutaneous and visceral fat as compared to placebo when these participants underwent a CT scan. Again, none of these folks were instructed to eat in a calorie deficit. It was really just consume the apple polyphenol beverage, or in the previous study, consuming 300 grams of apples per day. So what is this telling us, right? When it comes to fruit and this conversation around fruit making us fat, or fruit being included in the diet, or should it not be included, or vegetables are better than fruit, or we need to go lower carb. By some mechanism, apples especially, and even there's some evidence to suggest berries as well, caused improved satiety and generally led to people eating less as a whole, right? That's how we're losing weight and we're achieving some type of energy deficit. There are plenty of known mechanisms to this, such as the fiber content of the apples, but there may be mechanisms that we don't even realize yet, right? Because even in that apple polyphenol beverage that people were consuming, that would have had the fiber essentially removed, or it's not going to have the same fiber benefits as eating an entire whole apple. So the fact that those people were still seeing some type of change in visceral and subcutaneous fat, I think is a positive indication and speaks to maybe more the antioxidant and polyphenol effects and how these things may be addressing oxidative stress inside the body, and the fact that a lot of people in the Western world eating a standard American diet have substantial amounts of inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance. Apples specifically are a rich source of antioxidants and polyphenols, which have the potential to reduce that inflammation, potentially quell that oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species through not only the vitamins contained in the apple, but also the antioxidant and polyphenol content as well. These things can contribute to potentially improved regulation of cravings, potentially reducing our likelihood to overeat. And there's a lot of different mechanisms here, right? So there's the actual consumption of fruit, which as a single ingredient whole food from a caloric perspective, there's a decent amount of food volume there with certain fruits, especially berries, watermelons, apples, going to be different than someone eating like packaged snack food and an equivalent amount of calories there, certainly going to be less total grams when we look at this from a volumetrics perspective. Now, in any case, as we wrap up today's episode, the main takeaways here is that sometimes even very small changes, such as adding a single ingredient whole food like an apple or like berries, can make a difference when it comes to our health, when it comes to our weight loss and our body composition. They have the ability to positively impact our health over time, both internally and even in terms of those external results we're seeing with our subcutaneous and visceral fat. So adding an apple to someone's diet, adding those berries can actually make a difference. So no, fruit doesn't make you fat. In fact, quite the opposite. Even in studies where people were not instructed to eat in a calorie deficit, we saw weight loss as a result of the inclusion of fruit. So adding whole fruit to your diet or your client's diet, if you're a health and fitness professional, does have the potential to have a positive impact on satiety and the regulation of hunger and cravings. If you combine that with other satiety-inducing tools, protein consumption, adequate hydration, blood sugar regulation, you have a recipe for hunger management and overall health. If you learned something new, enjoyed this episode, or found the studies interesting and you think someone else would benefit, please share the show. You can do that by either copying the link of wherever you're listening to this particular episode or by dropping a 5-star rating and review on audio platforms. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube and make sure you're subscribed on audio and video so you never miss an episode. This content is designed to enhance and continue the ripple effect of coaching as my team and I shared no-cost content with the world. Chances are you probably never would have found this platform or podcast in the first place if one of my original listeners never shared it with you. This could have been by leaving a rating and review, messaging it to you the old-fashioned way, or maybe screenshotting the show and posting it on their Instagram stories or social media wherever they share stuff. So do me a favor and pay it forward and share this content with the world. It's a way that we can reach more people, provide this information and no-cost content so that people can apply it in their transformation, and ideally take some of the complexities when it comes to our health, make it a little bit more simple, and use it in ways to improve our nutrition and metabolic health as a whole. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for listening to today's show, and I will talk to you in the next episode.